Unspoken Issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. We have returned. It is a terrible trio of Jesse, Chris Armstrong, Evan Bevan sitting right over there. All three of us have gotten together, and we are going to be talking about a 90s property that, me personally, I didn't know was a comic until I played the video game about 2 years ago. So we're going to be talking about Battle Chasers, but this was all generated in the mind of one Chris Armstrong. So Chris, you said it was. You said, "Hey, throw out on the poll. We need to throw a poll out, asking them to pick from a couple options." So go ahead and lay it on our listeners what the idea was here.
Well, I actually, probably a couple years ago, I kind of came up with several different books I wanted to cover at some point, and tried to kind of match stuff up with in categories that kind of fit well together. I think at one point we did Battle Chasers as a poll with Crimson and Danger Girl as the three cliffhanger books. We'll talk more about that. And I think I expected Battle Chasers to win that actually, but Crimson won that one pretty handily, and we talked about that a couple years ago. But the sword and sorcery type comics are not usually a big thing for me, and they weren't something I'd really cared about. And then in the late 90s, I think this was 97 or 98, looking at April 98 for this one, and in 99 Warlands came around. So there were two sword and sorcery type epic Lord of the Rings sort of and manga influenced art for both of these books. Very different, but both influenced by manga and anime. So I thought that would be kind of a natural fit for a poll. Hey, which of these two, similarly themed books would people want to hear us talk about? And Battle Chasers won pretty handily, I think.
Yeah, it did. I've got the poll results right here. So total of 15 votes. So we had some friends out there on the Twitterverse. Warlands, 26.7% of the vote. Battle Chasers was 73.3% of the vote. Over on the Unspoken Issues Facebook page, we threw the poll up there. A total of 16 votes. 32% going to Warlands and 68% of that going to Battle Chasers. So in both venues, Battle Chasers walks out the winner. Dean Compton says, Battle Chasers, FTW for the win. There you go.
He was right.
So Battle Chasers, okay. are you seeing this back in the day, Chris, and tempted to pick it up? We know about Joe Mad. I know you probably could recognize Joe Mad's art from probably a mile away looking at this stuff. Are you seeing this on the shelf and going, okay, I might pick it up, or did you pick it up, or what's up?
Yeah, I was a big fan of this book when it came out. I was excited about Cliffhanger. I picked up all those books, at least in the early days of the imprint. Cliffhanger was pretty well hyped, I think, by Wizard and other comic which I don't know how many magazines were even left by the late 90s. But it was almost seen, at least by me, as a second wave of Image, because it was a lot of hot young artists kind of striking out and doing their own independent books. Joe Matt had been one of the biggest artists in the industry, working on Uncanny X-Men for a while before he launched Battle Chasers. And J. Scott Campbell launched Danger Girl with Cliffhanger. He had been big on, I think, Gen 13 before that at, Wildstorm. Ramos, I'd never really read anything he had done, but I think he was on The Flash and a lot of DC books before he moved over and started doing Crimson, which was the most long running of those early Cliffhanger books by a wide margin. Although Danger Girl had several other miniseries throughout the years, I think even up into recent years. But yeah, I was really into Battle Chasers, and I was excited to see what all the Cliffhanger guys did. Now, you said you had never even heard of it until the video game came out later. What about you, Evan? Did you get any of these Cliffhanger books back then?
I did not. I was reading about them in Wizard. I was actually surprised to learn that they had gotten to 9 issues, because the main thing I knew about Battle Chasers was sword, sorcery, and delays.
Yeah, I think Danger Girl may have had some delays, not to the extent that Battle Chasers did. And I think Crimson was pretty much like clockwork, was coming out pretty regularly. Yeah. But yeah, there were huge delays in between a lot of the issues in Battle Chasers, and the longest delay, of course, is between issues 9 and 10, because 10 is coming out. By the time this goes up, I'm sure it'll be out, but it's as we recorded, I guess it's coming out next week.
Are you sure you want to count on an issue of Battle Chasers coming out?
Well, I'm only confident because Joe Mad is not doing the art himself. He's farming that out to another artist who looks like, I've seen a lot of the pages, on social media and stuff. It's a pretty good approximation of Joe Mad. The guy's got his own style, but it's very similar to Joe Mad stuff. So I'm excited to see how the story finally ends.
Yeah. I actually didn't know it was coming back out. I mean, I'd heard people say, "Oh, I hope one day it'll be finished." I got issues 2 and 3 out of a dollar bin at a comic shop around here not too long ago, which was how I figured out where issue 1 was, because I was reading it on Hoopla, which doesn't separate the issues at all. So I read an 8-page story from like a 0 or preview issue and was halfway through issue 2 before I realized where issue 1 actually was. I actually have more notes on the 8-page intro story than issue 1.
So it was 8 pages?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at my issue number 1 here, and there's like a letter from Joe Mad at the end talking about the book, and then at the bottom it says, "What the heck is Battle Chasers Prelude? Where can I get it?" And it says, Battle Chasers Prelude is a 16-page comic, which includes an original story and some sketches that you can get at anotheruniverse.com. Which was
I was figuring even before you said that whenever there's a special preview, there's always sketches, which are neat, but I would prefer story.
Right.
Like I want that as bonus content. I don't want it as the bulk or half of the issue.
But yeah, I wonder if that Prelude is the 8-page story that they have at the beginning of the trade. I have the trade somewhere, but I couldn't track it down before we recorded, so I couldn't check.
I think I was kind of bummed when he left Uncanny X-Men, because, I mean, to me, the X-Men were Joe Mad and a Kubert. That's what the X-Men looked like when I was reading them. So
right, yeah, man. Joe Mad had a career. I was looking him up here a little bit. By the way, Battle Chasers 0 through 9. Okay, that's 10 issues that have released in between 1998 and 2001. So that's 3 years. That 10 issues dropped. Which ain't too bad. It's about 3 issues a year, maybe a little bit more. So yeah, there's some delays. I would imagine you're trying to get that out there as much as possible. My goodness, I mean, his artwork is it is astounding. I really do like some Joe Mad. I
liked him a lot on Uncanny X-Men. He had some other stuff he had done before that for Marvel and even like Ultraverse and probably some other stuff. I think he'd done a lot of ads too, like a lot of the ads you would see in the 90s, I think, before he got like regular, were like maybe one of those Pizza Hut ads for like an X-Men book or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the best art Joe Mad ever did, was this Battle Chasers run. Later on, he would do, as we mentioned, I think Evan mentioned in the chat earlier, he did an Ultimates run that is not great, although his art is okay in it. And then he did like Avenging Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was a team up with Wolverine and maybe one with Elektra. There were 2 different books. I forget which one. Maybe it was a Wolverine and Spider-Man team up and a Wolverine and Elektra team up.
Okay.
And he did the art on those, but he hasn't done much of anything like, I think Evan mentioned earlier, he got into video games, and that's where I think Dark Souls, is that the first one he was on?
Darksiders. Jesse and I were just talking about that.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Darkstalkers.
Darkstalkers, which we both thought it was.
Which was a fighting game that had a very buxom vampire lady in there.
I mean, not compared to
Monica. Get that here too.
I was gonna say you might be able to compare Monica and I can't remember the girl's name from
Morrigan. Or?
No, you're right. It's Morgan. Evans played that game quite a bit. He knows the name.
I mean, I have, but for the Marvel characters.
Okay, all right.
I played it for the articles, Jesse.
His art, especially like in this issue and some of the later issues, they were delayed because, I'm sure a lot of people would say because he's lazy, it takes him forever to do anything. But like when he does actually get the issues out, they're a lot more detailed, it seems like, than what he was doing like at Marvel. It's high quality coloring and paper and everything from this Cliffhanger imprint. So it looks fantastic.
The fact that that even with all those delays, it kept coming out, there was a demand for it, and 20-some years later, he's going to finish it. Tells you that a lot of people thought it was worth the wait.
It's interesting because I heard that news, generated some news that it was coming back. Like I said, never read any of the comic. I think I'll save my discussion about the video game at the end, but I played the video game playing the video game first and then coming in and reading issue 1 was interesting because I was all of a sudden like, hey, I know all these characters. And now all of a sudden I'm starting to see kind of some of the stuff that was pulled from this universe into the game, which was pretty neat.
I was thinking when that was released that maybe Joe Mad even said, I'm never going to finish the comic, so here's how I'm going to finish the story to this video game.
Battle Chasers #1. This was a imprint of Wildstorm. Cliffhanger was, that is. Imprint of Wildstorm Comics, founded in 1998 by Joe Mad, J. Scott Campbell, which is he's an artist, correct? Because I know he's another signature artist that I know I could recognize too.
You've seen his variant covers on everything. And then anytime Marvel needs a Mary Jane variant cover, they call J. Scott Campbell. With good reason. I mean,
Yeah. He did a lot of the covers for the Straczynski Amazing Spider-Man one, too. He was a cover artist for that. He doesn't really do interiors anymore.
Okay. And then, of course, the other founder there was Humberto Ramos. We talked about Crimson. Great artist as well. So, all right. So this issue dropped on sale April 15th, 1998. Title of the story we're going to get into is The Most Dangerous Game. Written and penciled by Joe Mad. Helping out on writing apparently is Munir Sharif. I'm just guessing, so I apologize if I butchered that. Inked by Tom McWeeny. Inked by Tom McWeeny and then lettered by Richard Starkings. I did see an ad for Comic Craft in here for fonts, which was really weird. I've never seen a font ad, like as in selling fonts. That's something new. I'll have to send you guys a picture of it. Joe
Mad, in his letter in the back, he's kind of thanking all the writer and the other artists and stuff. And he specifically mentions, he says, no one knows how to make a book fun to read like Comic Craft does. Richard Starkings and company are madmen, always coming up with new fonts, sound effects, etc. And then he goes on a little past that, but
it's the truth. I mean, really, Richard Starkings and Comic Craft, I think they've come up on this podcast a couple times, and how much the lettering is just, it's fantastic. It does make it fun to read. So I agree. Colored by Christian Lichtner and Aaron Lewson, it looks like. Aaron Lewson. So our story begins with a young girl named Gully running for her life from some werewolves, protecting a precious box that belonged to her missing father, Aramis. Trying to find shelter in the deserted city of Greenock, Gully is cornered by her pursuers. Attempting to fight back, Gully is clearly outmatched and things look dire until a mysterious hulking figure opens fire on the werewolves. Gully has been saved by Calibretto, a massive war golem who is able to rescue Gully and her father's box. Calibretto takes Gully back to his home where he lives with the magician Nolan. Nolan tells Gully that he knew her father and looks to meet with King Veneer in the morning to find out what their next step should be. In the meantime, Nolan is able to undo the magic spell that prevented Aramis's box from being opened, revealing a pair of magical gauntlets inside. Meanwhile, in a bar in the rough and tumble town of Vandalheim, sounds pretty rough and tumble, a warrior by the name of Garrison is looking to drown his sorrows until the beautiful bounty hunter Red Monica appears with an offer to join her in freeing a prisoner from Skyhold. When Garrison declines, Monica berates him for the condition he is in, telling him to end his pathetic life as it is no longer worth living, and walks out. So there you go. That is issue 1. We're setting the stage for what's about to come in the next few issues. Evan, can we start with you? You got your notes there? You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I am ready to go. Well, like I mentioned, I read the preview too, which a fun, interesting first issue. Definitely draws you in. I was even more drawn in by the preview, but I'll try not to keep going on to that, keep returning to that. Well, that does give you a little better idea of what Gully's running from. And just, draws you in from the first page. But this, you start out with a little mystery with Nolan and Calibretto. Well, I assume it's Calibretto getting the armor placed on him. Maybe not. But then you've got Gully running and, meets this mysterious, scary looking dude who smashes the other scary looking dudes. And we're off to the races. I think like one of you guys said, you can recognize Joe Mad's art anywhere. And there's people you can compare it to. And I know people said it was kind of anime influenced, but I'm not a good enough art critic to say, but there's just something about his that makes it distinct You can compare it to others, but it definitely stands out.
Yeah,
Although I did see some shades of Gormer the Ancient, one of the deep cut supporting characters when he was on X-Men in Nolan. Kind of reminded me of him a little bit.
Okay, all right. For me, Joe Mad's faces, that's where I think I could point out at least, okay, that's a Joe Mad face. The sneer, somebody's yelling or screaming in pain. I always picture Wolverine. Joe Mad's depiction of Wolverine for some reason. Was Joe Mad drawing him? It had to have been back in the Bone Claw days, right? Shortly after. Yeah. I remember him, and there's a section in the comic, and I don't know if it was in the one that you read, because they do recap in issue 1 what happened. Do they do that in the anthology that you were reading?
That was when I first started suspecting that maybe I was reading more than one issue, because I'm like, that's a pretty detailed flashback for something that you can just flip back a couple pages, right. And then you don't need that preview story. It fleshes it out, and like I said, there's a great intro that just sets the scene and drops you right into the middle of this. I mean, it almost reminds me of A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie, where you're just like, hey, there's a war going on, there's a princess, there's a bad guy, go.
Yeah.
And you don't know all the specifics, but you know who's who and what they're running from and what the threat is. It's a great way to start off, and there's a lot of elements in it that feel familiar, but at the same time it doesn't feel like just a rehash of like, yeah, here's some sword and sorcery tropes dressed up with some nice art. I mean, it's got a flavor of its own.
That's kind of similar to the note that I have here. I do love the world that we are just thrust into. Just like you said, we're off and running. And when you look at this, we've got werewolves, massive weaponized automatons here, and magic gauntlets. This is going to be a crazy story. I cannot wait to see what's going to unfold, because this first issue is just scratching the surface. When you start seeing this, you're like, what else could be happening here?
Yeah, I definitely want to read more. I may even go through and do a couple blog posts on the ones I picked up just to be like a crossover, Jesse.
I love it. My next note on here is just Joe Mad's killing it. We've already discussed that. I mean, it just can't say it enough that this is some superb art, folks.
And it really fits the tone of the story, because at first blush, his art looks, and I don't say this dismissively, but looks kind of cartoonish. And like Chris said, there's a lot of detail and there's some real grit in here. And this story, you've got a precocious child and magical stuff. This is a dark story.
Yeah.
It's a very dark story. And even though, on the surface, it looks like, a delightful fantasy adventure. And so the art, it really fits the tone of the story perfectly, too.
Yeah. The other note that I have here is, I mean, as you go through the comic, I already talked about Richard Starkings, folks. You can see Richard Starkings putting in the work on this thing. Any of those words that are out there, any of those sound effects that are out there, it's just, it sprinkles on the sundae. It sets it off. It does a good job of making it not only just a Joe Mad comic. This has got some comic craft lettering going on, and it sets it off even more. My favorite part of this book is also my panel. So I'm not going to talk about that. So I want to save that to last. So that's kind of all my notes really that I have before we get into.
Does it involve Monica?
You guys, now come on. Oh.
Well, no, look, I know that comics are known for exaggerations of anatomy, especially female anatomy, but I feel like maybe when Joe Mad was designing this, somebody said, "Can you believe they're still putting Power Girl in that costume?" And he said, "Hold my beer."
Right, dude. Yeah.
Like, we don't see her fight, but I assume at some point she fights, and I don't know how. Like, I feel like walking in that outfit would be a big challenge.
Right.
Yeah, Red Monica, Joe Mad admitted back in around the time of the book was being launched that her physique anyway is intended to be a parody of like the bad girl era of comics.
Yeah, I was looking just to see like when.
Oh,
I'm not looking at Monica. I'm at Mike's Amazing World of Comics. I will share my screen just so you guys believe.
No, that's okay.
What I'm doing is I'm taking a look on Mike's Amazing World just to see if what his like first comic listed on there was. And yeah, it makes total sense that his first comic that he penciled was Marvel Comics 89 from 1991. This is an artist that began in the early 90s. All right. Was going through Marvel. We already talked a little bit about what he's done at Marvel, but this was the thing at the time. These ladies were absolutely drawn with, we'll say, endowments. That's probably the best way.
Huge tracts of land.
She's beautiful. She's rich. She's got huge tracts of land.
Huge tract of land. He's an artist in the 90s. This is kind of how they did things. But if he said that it was a parody, that's hilarious. Because
yeah,
nobody's
especially like the
it would almost have to be. I mean,
yeah, like the late 90s for like after Wildstorm went to DC and Image, Liefeld left Image. Like there was just a glut of those at Image and other independent books of just like the sexy bad girl comics.
Mm-hmm. Evangeline. Sorry, I was drinking. I was getting ready. Evangeline or Evangeline or oh my goodness, who was the other one? Glory was sometimes portrayed that way.
You could consider Witchblade one of the big. Witchblade is probably the one that like started that off. I would think.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And
started that trend.
I still remember the character feature they did in Wizard on Aphrodite 9. And, like most of them, they pointed to like different, like, if it was Cable, it's like Cable uses big guns. So they point to his gun or whatever. And every note they had pointed to her butt. And I'm like, come on, guys, just pretend you're about something.
No, not in the 90s. All right. Let's hear it, Chris. What do you got for notes there?
I'll just kind of echo what you guys were saying about like the prelude or whatever. It's not essential stuff. It's fun to jump into this story right in the middle of a big chase, more or less. As part of the trade, I don't think I'd ever read that or zero issue, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, until I got it's called, I think, Battle Chasers Anthology.
That's what I saw. That's what's on Hoopla.
Yeah, I bought that a couple of years ago and actually finally sat down and read. I've read I've had all the issues, but I hadn't read the story in so long. I reread that in trade form maybe about a year ago, I guess. And that was probably the first time I'd actually read those pages. But yeah, not essential, but it's nice to have in the trade anyway. I really like Calibretto. Yeah. I like his like low tech kind of ball bearing, like stone ball bearings that he uses as bullets, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely a steampunk kind of feel to it.
A robot or cyborg type, but like in a medieval fantasy setting. So there's no cybernetics or whatever, but yeah,
almost like a big if you look at his face, it looks like a helmet that a knight would possibly wear. He looks like this massive knight in shining armor almost. Or it looks like the grill of a train as well, like the big. it's a massive. I just remember playing the game when I first was introduced to Calibretto. I was like, my gosh, what in the world is this thing? Because they do a great job in the art style of the game to get across like size differences too. And you see little Gully sitting there with her big gauntlets on, and then Calibretto shows up, and you're like, what in the world is this thing? So I'm just remembering parts of the plot of that game. You're flying over the land and something happens with the ship. And so the team gets separated. So a lot of the part of the beginning is you trying to find the other members of the team. So that's kind of your way of introducing the team, I guess, as you go along. But anyway, I remember running into Calibretto going, oh, man. And then, of course, find out he's on my team. I'm like, oh, sweet.
He reminds me of certain characters. Like for some reason, especially when he was all covered up, I kept thinking of Bad Rock. But
yeah.
He looks unique too. It's not like they wanted a so and so type for this. So it's pretty cool the way he stands on his own, even though he reminds you of different characters.
Right. That's one thing that Image Comics, especially early Image Comics, they were criticizing them because they were straight copies off of some Marvel properties. This doesn't feel like that at all. This definitely feels like, hey, this is a new world. These are some new characters, and they feel all very original to me. I know, Evan, you said the old guy looked like somebody you'd seen. Nolan looked like somebody you'd seen. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't mean, and it's Joe Mad's design. I mean, it's a short, mysterious magic guy. So no, I didn't mean that negatively. It reminded me of that character.
Right.
Not the, it wasn't like Shafter Star or Shafter
Star.
Well, no, but those were both Liefeld's guys, so what are you going to do?
And Garrison kind of has Gambit hair. He
Yeah.
doesn't really look like Gambit so much in the face, as far as that design, but the hair is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. The main association I made in that scene, though, was that the Death's Door Saloon. For some reason, when you walked in, you see when Monica walks in, and you see all the collection of unsavory characters there. It reminded me of the Snuggly Duckling in Tangled.
Been a while since I've seen that one. That's been a long time.
Look, there was a time when Tangled was played a lot in my house, and given the choice of some of the others, especially in the Wiggles days, that was just fine with me.
That scene where she walks in, also, I don't think I'd ever noticed until I read it today. Behind one of these characters, you can see an open doorway, and there's just like a noose hanging down.
I see that.
The ceiling.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Also, it looks like Batman is back there behind that guy's shoulder.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Silhouette.
Yep. That's hilarious. Oh, that's funny.
It's like there's some other questionable activities going on in there, too.
The two guys that come in with Red Monica, those guys are enemies in the game. So I remember them clearly, especially the dude with like the mask around over his mouth. That guy is an enemy that you fight in the game. But that's the only other than the main characters, that's the only kind of like relation to the game that I can see in here. No, I shouldn't say that. The werewolves you definitely fight werewolves. And I assume at some point later in this series, you're going to fight skeletons too, because that happens in the game. So I'm sure skeletons have got to pop up. All right. Any other notes there for what you got there for this Battle Chasers #1?
I do want to, you just mentioned the werewolves. I always love me some werewolves. I love it when they show up. Now, these are werewolves, not wolfmen, which are also great.
Okay.
But of course, we know wolfmen are men who turn into werewolves or wolfmen, whereas werewolves are more animalistic.
Gotcha.
Whereas wolfmen look like men that are all hairy and stuff.
Yes, you're right.
Just want to educate everybody.
I get it now. For a second there, I was like, where is he going with this? Now I get it.
Unspoken Issues is fun and educational.
That is correct.
I did not know the distinction. I used werewolf and wolfman interchangeably, and now I've learned.
Yeah, werewolves may not have nards. We know wolfmen do. Not sure about werewolves. The only other thing I really had, in addition to that Battle Chasers preview in this issue 1 I've got, one of the back page ads is for Frank Frazetta's Fantasy Illustrated.
Oh, I saw that.
Issue, which proclaims featuring an all-new story by Joe Maduiera, however you say it. And it's got the Battle Chasers logo, so I'm thinking, is there a Battle Chasers story in this Fantasy Illustrated issue that can only be found there?
I don't know if it's in this trade, but I was looking it up again when I was trying to figure out what exactly I was reading, and there is a story in that magazine you were talking about. I don't know if it's included in this or not.
Okay.
It's a fantasy. Or a Battle Chasers.
Yeah.
Story.
The information on the anthology on Hoopla does not say specifically what issues are in it. Although, and I love this, on Hoopla, don't miss this definitive collection, which includes never before seen sketches and new artwork, including a fold out poster.
I wonder what that is of.
On a digital edition. I mean, they're just
that's the description.
Reprinting whatever was on the print.
That's hilarious, dude. So the description for the digital comic says, "Check out the folded poster." Nice.
And maybe the fold out poster's in there. I haven't gotten to the end, but I mean, like I said, this was a lot of fun. This is one of those that I'd always heard about, and then I think maybe even because it never got finished, I'm like, yeah, why bother? And then I was searching through this shop has a huge set of dollar boxes that I still haven't gotten through. I did find Battle Chasers 2 and 3 in there and grabbed them because it went from whatever, this is overhyped and the guy didn't even finish it to I wonder what all the fuss is about. And it's a lot of fun. Well,
let's get into our panel of the book, and I'll go ahead and start with this one because I think that if I didn't, I'm not going to pick it. As much as I would love to pick the full page splash of Monica coming into the bar, I'm not going to do it. Instead, I'm going to pick the one panel that I think makes anybody who's reading this realize that we've got a crazy world on our hands. And that is going to be when Calibretto, in the middle of saving Gully, and the werewolves are attacking, he shows up, he unloads on one of the werewolves, and then he gets like 3 or 4 arrows in the back, and he turns around, and from his shoulder out pops a laser-sighted flamethrower. And I was like, okay, all bets are off in this universe. I mean, we've got some crazy stuff going on. When you say sword and sorcery, I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. We're going to have, we're going to have a tale, just like you said, some Lord of the Rings stuff. I don't read sword and sorcery comics. We've recorded our discussion on Conan versus Rune, and that's the closest I've come to reading sword and sorcery, and probably, well, for a very, very, very long time, and probably the previous time was by accident somehow. So this is, it's rare that I get excited for what's going to happen in a comic like this. And right there, I mean, obviously it's just like this weird bit of modernization, this modern weaponization that happens with Calibretto, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, sweet, this is pretty cool. So I imagine if you were a new reader and didn't know exactly what Calibretto was going into this, you're probably like, okay, yeah, this isn't just this isn't your daddy's sword and sorcery right here, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't Frank Frazetta on Conan or something like that. This is definitely Joe Mad and throwing some flavor in here to mix things up. So there you go. That's my panel. I'll throw it to you, Evan Bevan.
That was almost my panel.
Oh, really?
I always grab a backup in case somebody picks the same one. But I was like, man, I kind of hope Jesse picks my first one and I can do that laser sight one. Because, it's a small thing. But I remember I was looking at it. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. It
really, it's more meaningful than it appears. The one I ended up picking was just when we finally see Calibretto after the lightning strikes him and the cloak and everything is off, and you just get an idea how massive, how strange. Like I said, I kept thinking, oh, this guy looks like Middle Eastern Badrock with his stuff wrapped around his head, and he's definitely a unique character, and that just gives you an idea of the scale and just really showcases Joe Mad's art. So yeah, that's pretty awesome, Splash.
I agree. Yeah, he's
like the second most top-heavy character in the book.
Yeah, he gets struck by the lightning, and you're like, oh man, he's taken out. Nope, he just uses that to charge himself up, and it's good panel, good pick. All right, Chris, let's hear it.
Both good picks from you guys. I'm going to go not Calibretto. I'm going to go, I think it's page 6, panel 6, and it's going to be when one of those werewolves smashes through the door, or through the wall, going after Gully. I think he says, what big eyes you have.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
His teeth are huge, his mouth's open, he's got the glowing eyes, and we get some of that classic Comicraft font at the top going crash or key rash. I really like that. I like the way he draws these werewolves, so that's going to be my panel for this issue.
The werewolves on this book were I mean, they're the
real gangly, hunchbacked almost.
Yeah, they're like the goons that are working for somebody to try and secure this box from Gully. But I mean, at one point, like a couple panels before what you're talking about, the werewolves have Gully surrounded, and they could have took her right there. They could have killed her or did whatever. It was 4 of them surrounding her. They just look at her and with a big smile on their face because she's like, "I will not give you the box," and they're like, "Then run." And that's actually, I mean, it's pretty sick. They're out for the hunt, man. That's pretty cool.
As I was reading into issue 2, inadvertently, he says like, yeah, okay, I shouldn't have toyed with her. I should have finished it right there.
Ah, well, there you go.
I might have to amend my rant earlier, because now I'm looking at these werewolves again, and while they look like werewolves in the face, less like a wolfman, they are wearing pants. So maybe they are wolfmen. Is
that a qualifier?
I'm going to have to re-examine the entire series.
You could put pants on a dog, bro. You can put pants on a dog anytime. That doesn't make the dog a man.
That's true.
I'm just going to say, I don't know.
Please use that quote when you promo this episode. Tune into the latest edition of Unspoken Issues and hear why Jesse Starcher says, you can put pants on a dog, bro.
It'll be 30 seconds, 30-second TikTok. Get ready, guys. You're all going to be featured on it. Oh, man.
This issue also is like a really quick read.
It really is.
And I feel like most of the issues are, which is probably even worse when you're waiting 4 or 5 months for an issue, and then it
yeah.
takes you 8 minutes to read it. But it's really an enjoyable read too, though.
Yeah. Sometimes, especially as a podcaster and a guy that has to sit here and make notes on issue after issue, these are a welcome respite from some of the stuff that I get into. You know, if I had multiple issues of what we got here and the dialogue is not so oppressive, man, count me in. I love to read stuff like that. You know, if you can tell a story, which this is a great story. We got our first issue, and yeah, it goes by really quickly. But man, if you take your time and look at the art, it's all fun to read, or or it's all fun to absorb. So the only other stuff I had listed here, the video game. I talked about playing the video game already. If you ever get a chance to play it, I don't think it's out there on Xbox Game Pass where I got it anymore. But the art style is fantastic in the game. Essentially, it's you can pick three for your party, and it's kind of similar to Final Fantasy. You go across the land, you run into some battles, your party goes out there, and of course you can level up these guys, and they each get different powers. Gully's gauntlets change, like you can have her gauntlets do different things, so I assume that's something that's going to happen in this series. She's going to be able to put these gauntlets on and use them like she does in the game. The gauntlets, you can level those things up, and she can do different attacks. You know, Calibretto's stuff is crazy. I think at one point he does get struck by lightning in the game, and you know that's one of the power-ups or the powerful hits that you can do, and he shoots the lightning out. But yeah, the art style of the game is very reminiscent of what you get here. So it's clearly Joe Mad had his influence on the game as well. It's actually a decent game. You would think that sometimes games that are based off of comic book properties, it's tough for them to translate and be decent. Especially, they took this game and pretty much made it a role-playing game. You know, like I said, similar to Final Fantasy, and it worked. It worked really well, actually. So
it probably helps that the creator is very accomplished in both media.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
He knows his comic stuff. He knows that, and he knows the story backwards and forwards.
Right. And I never had a chance.
Sometimes when creators go to a different format, it doesn't always work out well. But he's obviously someone who's been very successful in both.
I've never had a chance to play Darksiders, but like I was telling Evan before we got on here, Darksiders currently is at its third installment, I'm pretty sure. So that's a game that people liked enough for a couple sequels to have been made. Good on you, Joe Mad. So when is the next issue coming out? Issue 10? You said it was this coming.
I saw it was June 14th.
Wow. All right. Well, I can get caught up probably.
Yeah, jump on Hoopla.
Yeah, for sure. Get on Hoopla. If you're a member of your local library, get on Hoopla, and you should be able to download and read the whole anthology for free. They check that out for 21 days and read it. So highly suggested. Always support your local library, folks. That's for sure.
Yeah, we did Warlands as the competitor for this in the poll. Evan, have you ever read Warlands or any of the Pat Lee stuff? Familiar with Pat Lee at all?
I feel like I should be, but I'm drawn.
He hasn't done anything in a while that I'm aware of. But so like a few months ago, I reread the Pat Lee Transformers issues that he did in like the early 2000s.
Oh,
Dreamwave was his studio, part of Image.
I remember those issues. But go ahead.
Yeah, he did some Transformers Generation 1 stuff. And I reread like the first 6 issues of that, and that kind of made me want to go back and look at some of the other stuff he did. So I think he started. His art style was originally more like a kind of like a poor man's J. Scott Campbell. He did Bloodpool, one of the Youngblood like spinoff books in the mid '90s. He did a book called Dark Minds that was kind of super anime influenced. A lot of people, I think, called it a Ghost in the Shell ripoff. I don't know because I never have watched Ghost in the Shell. But then he did Warlands after that, and I've been reading some of those issues as well recently. And it's also a sword and sorcery type thing. Like Battle Chaser's not nearly as good. His art is looks like an anime movie sort of, which it's cool in its own way. And the Dreamwave guys did a lot of like computer effects on their fonts and word balloons and stuff like that. And some of it still looks kind of cool, and some of it looks really bad now. It's aged really poorly. But those books were kind of cool. I kind of liked Warlands. And then like Pat Lee had like some success with those. Then he did the Transformers stuff. And then he did like Wolverine Punisher miniseries back when Punisher was like the Angel of Death version.
Okay.
And then eventually he like had some like shady business dealings. Apparently, like people were complaining about not getting paid, and like his business kind of fell apart or whatever, and he hasn't really done anything since then. But I was just kind of curious if you guys had read any of the Pat Lee stuff from like the turn of the century.
I was going to say.
I remember
so
that
funny.
Wolverine Punisher limited series. I had an issue of that. But
Warland's book is much more like a Lord of the Rings ripoff, I think a lot of people would probably say, but it's a lot more like the scope is way bigger. Like there's basically like instead of Sauron and the armies, Sauron is like a vampire army that's trying to wipe out, like the race of men, and there's dwarves and elves and demons and dragons and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I actually kind of like what I've read of it, going back and rereading it the last few weeks. But
so tfwiki.net, which I assume is Transformers Wiki, I assume. I'm just going to go ahead because tfwiki.net, Pat Lee, okay? So there's this second paragraph where I'm reading something that says history before the Transformers, and I'll read this. This is interesting. In 1996, Pat and his brother Roger decided to start their own studio within Image Comics, Dreamwave Productions, with Pat acting as company's president. With Dreamwave, Lee would continue accepting contractual work for other publishers, such as the 4-issue limited series Wolverine Punisher Revelation for Marvel, but also started to publish his own, and I'm going to read this as it's said here, but also started to publish his own blatantly plagiarized, and then that's stricken out. So there's a strike through on that. And then it says originally recreated titles such as Dark Minds and Warlands. So it's funny that it's written, but it's struck out, and then it says originally. But anyway, so yeah, it sounds like there must have been a little bit of controversy at some point before he took over the Transformers part of things anyway.
Well, I mean, Warlands, it was successful. There were several miniseries and stuff. I don't know. At the time, I'd never read any Lord of the Rings stuff. I still haven't, but I'd never seen the movies. They hadn't been released yet, obviously. But rereading them now, it's clearly like that's where they were drawn from, like that type of stuff. But the art's cool. They're still pretty fun to read.
I clicked on Dark Minds because I had never heard of that. And it took me to the Ghost in the Shell wiki. So apparently that's where they're probably saying he plagiarized that, maybe. Well, we did it. Battle Chasers #1, folks. You chose it. We read it. We told you what we thought of it. Let's go ahead and work on getting out of here. So, Evan Bevins, we'll start with you, buddy. Let's get into plugs. What do you got going on over there, sir?
Well, you can check out my writing at *51.blogspot.com. I promise I'm going to get back to Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC Universe, but I've been running through some Spider-Verse themed content, trying to figure out where I actually stopped reading Spider-Man 2099. So if you want to see a grown man forget what comics he's read, go to *51.blogspot.com. And also recently wrote about a movie I found at Dollar Tree entitled Chinese-Speaking Vampires, which is an accurately titled movie.
Okay.
And Jesse and I are working on the latest episodes of Snap Material, because if you make a podcast about it, then you're not just wasting your time playing a mobile game.
That's how I justify it.
There you go.
I'm doing research at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's what I tell my wife. I'm laying there in bed doing research.
And not too long ago, Mark Radulich and I did a comic strip on Cowboys and Aliens, which is both a comic book and a movie featuring cowboys and aliens.
Nice.
Chris Armstrong, I know that Small Screeners has got some stuff going on. What's the next show? I mean, I can't remember the last one. What's the next one? Go ahead, tell.
Our last one was Freeway, the Kiefer Sutherland, Reese Witherspoon trash-ploitation flick from I think 96. We're actually getting kind of behind. We're working on this other series, Because Movies, where we're looking at Netflix movies. We're a little behind on Small Screeners right now. We're going to be doing our next episode on Mark Dacascos' joint called Drive from the mid to late 90s, which is on Tubi, and that's going to be our next one. We're also actually recording later tonight on the Fear Street trilogy as part of our Netflix series. So got a few different irons in the fire, and we're going to try and catch up over the next month or two and get Small Screeners back on a monthly schedule anyway.
It's tough sometimes, trust me.
Yeah.
It really is. All right. Okay. Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Unspoken Issues podcast right here on the Source Material Comics feed. Listen, we got this show right here. Focuses solely on 90s comics. We have a good time talking about them. You can go back into the archive and find us discussing plenty plenty of 90s comics previous to this. And of course, the other podcast that I do right here, it's not 90s centric. It's everywhere. Say every decade, the Source Material Comics podcast, where we just get together and we talk about a comic. It's a book club for comics, pretty much. And recently, I know that tomorrow, as we record this, tomorrow I'm going to be editing Mark Radulich and I finishing out our trilogy of metal-related comics. So it's time for us to get out of here. That over there is Evan Bevins. There's Chris Armstrong. I'm Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.